Lamed Amud Aleph 30a. And now we have an important and often overlooked mitzvah we're about to learn about. And as we'll learn, the Rebbe actually made it a quasi-mission of his to bring this mitzvah back, to educate people on the importance of doing this mitzvah. That's where it's almost smack in the middle of the page. The line begins with the words Reb Shimon, Reshin in a like a Rashi Tevis, and then Hayel Ishni Ishni, and then V'Amr B'Shu Bar Abba. Okay, V'Amr B'Shu Bar Abba. B'Shu Bar Abba says Amar Rav Gidl Nim of Rav Gidl Nim of Rav Amar Rav Nim of Rav. So the statement seems to be coming at this juncture because it's the same people as the previous statement. The previous discussion on how to properly write the end of the page, and then the statement on the halacha about reading the last 8 verses in one aliyah, came from Rabbi Yeshua, son of Abba, and the name of Gidl, the name of Rav. And as I've said before here, the Gemara is a conglomerate of conversations. So as it is in conversations, where one person says something and there's somebody else, and you say, oh, that person reminds me. He also said this, that, and the other. So sometimes the Gemara will do that and go onto topics that are unrelated whatsoever to the discussion just because it's the same person speaking, or at least on their surface they seem unrelated. But here it's actually directly related. It's talking about the laws of writing a Sefer Torah. So they're kind of like, oh, you know what else he said about Sefer Torah? You know what else he said about Sefer Torah? Kind of adding to the conversation. So Rabbi Yeshua, son of Abba, said the name of Gidl, the name of Rav. Halakeach Sefer Torah Menachot, one who buys a Sefer Torah from the market, because he just takes one from somebody else. Kachaytev mitzvah menashok. It's as if he grabbed a mitzvah from the market. So what exactly does this mean? He grabbed a mitzvah from the market. Which mitzvah did he grab? And is that a good thing or is that not a good thing? Right. So, some context. The Torah says there's a mitzvah, there's a commandment in the Torah, and now you shall write this song referring to the Torah. So there's a commandment to write the Torah. It's a commandment that lasts for generations. That is to say, it's not just a commandment that was told then, although it was also true, but it's also a commandment for generations to come, that we need to write Torahs. So the mitzvah here is not to own one merely, but actually to write one. So if somebody else has a Torah, through which they fulfilled their commandment of writing a Torah, and you took it from them. So you've taken a mitzvah, but have you fulfilled it? Have you fulfilled the commandment by taking that mitzvah? Because you've acquired it, but you haven't written it. You haven't commissioned it to be written even. You just bought it. So the way Rashi writes it, Rashi says, you did a mitzvah, but not the best mitzvah. The best mitzvah would be if you wrote it, as we'll see in a moment, or at least commissioned it to be written. But over here, Rashi says, if you took it, you still did a mitzvah, but it's not the best mitzvah. It seems, however, from the halachic authority that they don't learn like Rashi, and that there is no mitzvah done if you buy it from the market. It's you grabbed the mitzvah, but you didn't fulfill the mitzvah. So when the Gemara says chaytev mitzvah, you've taken a mitzvah, it means to say, not in Rashi's understanding, but in others' understanding, that you've taken a mitzvah, not fulfilled it. Which is why, in other words, when it comes to tefillin, there's no mitzvah to commission a tefillin. The mitzvah is to put it on. There's no mitzvah to commission someone to write mezuzahs. The mitzvah is to write mezuzahs. The mitzvah is to affix it. When it comes to a Torah, the mitzvah is kisvu, write it. So if you bought one without commissioning it or without actually writing it yourself, then you haven't fulfilled the commandment. You've taken a mitzvah, but you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. That's the way most people read this Gemara. Although Rashi says you fulfilled the mitzvah, but not in the best possible manner.
You're going to use it, you're going to read from it.
But that's not the commandment, though.
But that's not the commandment.
It's a separate commandment. There's a commandment to learn Torah, that's true. But there's a commandment, kisvu, to write it. And you haven't fulfilled that mitzvah. You've taken a mitzvah, it's already been done, but you didn't do the mitzvah. Right? Although Rashi, as I just mentioned, says you did a mitzvah, but not in the best possible manner. And which is why, by the way, you'll see.
Don't
sorry?
follow Rashi?
In halacha, not always. Rashi is...
Most people haven't written the Torah.
Okay, we'll get to that. about most people haven't written the Torah. We'll get to that.
Isn't it that the same when you buy something? It's like you commission him to write it because he wrote it anyhow.
Depends when you buy it. If I buy a pre-made one, or I hire you to make one, it's a bit different. Commissioning someone to do a painting is different than buying a painting that's already made, right? Difference between buying a Torah or commissioning someone to write one. Okay, we'll get to that, how people fulfill the mitzvah today, and that's where the Rebbe comes in here. But I just want to note also, so you notice throughout the page there are big, bold, big bold letters, like footnotes that don't have any parentheses or brackets near them. So right after this word, there's kisvu, there's a little dalid. The next word is, we just read, Sefer Halakha Sefer Materav Menachot, someone who buys a Torah from the market. Kachaytev mitzvah, it's like he grabbed a mitzvah Menachot from the market. Kisvu, and then there's a little dalid there. So that little dalid, that font, footnote, is indication of where to find the statement in halacha, this statement of the Gemara in halacha. So in the previous statement where it says someone who bought it from the market, it's like he grabbed a mitzvah, there is no marker like that, because there's no halachic authority that follows that statement that as if you did a mitzvah. They just see that as actually the Gemara is saying it's not a mitzvah, as opposed to Rashi who said that it's a mitzvah, it's not the best mitzvah. Others learn it that it's as if you took the mitzvah but did not fulfill it, and that's why there's no marker, there's no footnote saying go find this halacha somewhere, because there is no halacha. But what is the halacha? The next statement. Kisvu, if you actually wrote the Torah, or if you commissioned someone to write it, so you hired someone before, please write a Torah for me. My lolav akasov, the verse considers it, the Torah considers it, ki'ilu kibum har Sinai, as if you've received the Torah at Sinai. So, as I mentioned, most people learn this to mean that now you fulfill the commandment of writing the Torah, and this commandment of having written the Torah is as if you've received it at Sinai. But at least we have in the wording of the Gemara support for Rashi's view of the Gemara. Rashi learned that when you bought it from the market, you did the mitzvah, but not in the best possible fashion.
It's not a hiddur mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah.
But it's a mitzvah. And the hiddur mitzvah is if you commissioned someone or you did it yourself. And the wording of the Gemara would support that, because the Gemara doesn't say that someone who writes it has fulfilled his commandment, has fulfilled his obligation. Yatzei deiche vasei, fulfilled his obligation. The Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara says one who writes it as if he received it from Sinai, as if there's like a bonus to having written it yourself. But the basic mitzvah you already did. So this is perhaps why Rashi comes with his conclusion of the Gemara. But as I mentioned, it's not the way it's halachically understood. From a halachic perspective, it's understood that if you buy it, you haven't fulfilled your mitzvah. And if you have not, if you bought it, but if you commissioned it to be written, it means you didn't buy a pre-written one. You commissioned someone to write it, then you did fulfill your commandment. Or if you wrote it yourself, if you are capable of doing so, then not only is it a mitzvah, but it's also as if you received the Torah at Sinai. Now to your question, how do people fulfill the mitzvah today? Amar Rav Shesha says, Im higia, if you've edited, or if you fixed, corrected, afilu ois achas, even one letter, Maila levakasov, the verse considers it, ki'ilu kasvu, as if you've written the entire Torah. So Torah that's missing a letter is invalid. So you bought a Torah. It wasn't commissioned. It was commissioned by the other guy who bought it from. So it was his mitzvah originally. But he hasn't fully fulfilled his mitzvah because it was missing a letter. You bought it. So you bought an incomplete Torah, and then you filled in one letter, or you commissioned someone to fill in one letter. So now you fulfilled your obligation. So what's the answer? How do people fulfill their obligation today of writing a Torah? You commission someone to write one letter in a Torah. And this is what the Rebbe did. In the 80s, the Rebbe publicly asked why nobody's doing this mitzvah. Why is nobody writing a Torah? Why aren't people writing Torahs? And they would give a whole explanation to try to justify the generations of times of people who did not fulfill the obligation, at least on its basic level, of writing a Torah. This wasn't done for generations to come. And it has all kinds of explanations. The most common the most basic of them is that there's a Rosh. The Rosh is a halachic decider / commentator on the Gemara, printed in the back of most standard Gemaras, writes that the mitzvah of writing a Torah is connected to the way you learn your Torah. This is the way people understand, at least the Gemara, the Rosh. And in Talmudic times, or pre-Talmudic times, I should say, where the oral law wasn't written, right? It was only transmitted verbally from teacher to student. It remained oral. That's why it's called the oral Torah. So you have to write that which you would learn, and the only writing which you would learn is an actual Torah. And therefore you're responsible to write a Torah. But today, where we learn Torah from printed books, so all you need to do is get a book printed. So it would seem, at least from this understanding of the Rosh, that if you buy just the Chumash, you fulfilled your obligation of writing a Torah. This is obviously very problematic, and because the Torah says write a Torah. And we just finished saying that has nothing to do with owning a Torah, it has to do with writing it. So the fact that you're connecting this mitzvah of writing a Torah to your learning, it seems a little bit to misunderstand the actual text of the verse, which says write the Torah. And as we've just been learning from the Gemara, that it's not about owning a Torah. Because if you bought one from the market, it's not good enough. You have to commission it to be written. So it seems like he's misreading the mitzvah, which is why the Beis Yosef concludes that when the Rosh says that today we fulfill the obligation by buying Chumashim or buying regular books of Torah, he doesn't mean that this is a replacement of the mitzvah of writing a Torah. He means in addition. You have a mitzvah to write a Torah because the Torah says write the Torah. But in addition to that, because nowadays we learn by books, you have an obligation to buy books. This is the way the Beis Yosef understands the Rosh. Right, that it's a separate obligation. One is an obligation to write Torah because Torah says to do so. You can't undo that because times have changed. But in addition to that, because today we learn from books, it's your responsibility to own books and to buy books that you're capable of learning. This is the way the Beis Yosef understands the Rosh, and the Shulchan Aruch seems to conclude that way, which is written by the Beis Yosef. And the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch struggle a little bit to try to justify the Rosh, but they come to the conclusion saying it would seem to make more sense to follow this understanding of the Rosh, because how could you undo a mitzvah? Which leads back to the original question, how did people for generations fulfill this commandment of writing a Torah? People haven't done it. There are other explanations that someone who makes a bracha, for example, someone who makes a bracha by the Torah when he gets an aliyah, it's a quasi-ownership when you're supposed to raise it up. People raise it up when they make a bracha. You raise a Torah. There's a quasi-ownership there, at least a temporary one. So maybe they fulfilled it that way. There are all kinds of explanations like that. But at the end of the day, as the Rebbe writes, that today, where writing Torahs are more common and easier than they used to be back in the day, I think we talked about this before, we have how many kosher Torahs here? So it's not a big deal to have community Sefer Torahs in which you pay to commission one letter. And we just finished saying that if you commission one letter, it's also good enough. And that's what the Rebbe did. The Rebbe founded community Sefer Torahs in Eretz Yisrael, and you can pay online. You buy $1. For $1, you buy one letter, and one letter belongs to you in the Torah. And in fact, the Rebbe also argued that this mitzvah is like a bris, which means that you can do it before you bar mitzvah also. It could be done for you before you even bar mitzvah. So just like a bris, I didn't voluntarily do it, but I still did the mitzvah because it was done to me when I was 8 days old. So likewise, you can commission a letter to be written for your children, and that fulfills their obligation as well for writing a letter in the Torah. And they began this campaign of making children's Sefer Torahs. And today there are 6-7 Sefer Torah, children's Sefer Torahs that are at the Kotel, I believe. That's where they're housed, at the Kotel. And each letter is written on behalf of another Jewish child somewhere in the world. And it's a campaign that still goes on until today of commissioning letters for children. They were talking about other benefits, that the Torah is the unifier of all Jewish people, and when Jews get together, especially Jewish children, get together to have letters written in Torah. It's a unifying entity. And Taka here, when we have like a baby gift that we give to children when they're born, the baby gift is a card, and the whole theme of the gift is to encourage parents to go online and buy a letter and a scroll for their children for $1, but for whatever it is, to fulfill this obligation of writing a Torah.
How is it derived that one letter satisfies the whole mitzvah?
Because it's invalid without it. Because that letter of the Torah is invalid. So you've essentially commissioned the validation of a Torah via writing. So the whole Torah is dependent on the one letter you added. This connects to the Jewish unity idea. All Jews are incomplete unless all Jews are together. Right? So it ties into this whole unity theme. On a side note, the other thing that the Rosh said, that Jews, that there's an obligation today to own books because we learn out of books, and if we're learning like the Beis Yosef, that it's a separate obligation, one to write the Torah, which you fulfill by getting one letter commissioned. And the additional, because nowadays we learn using books, therefore you're obliged to have books in your home, is one of the Rebbe's 10 campaigns. By Yismael Svarim, having books in one's home, besides for the fact that you end up using them, clearly, but also just to create an environment in your home. Sorry? You're laughing. Or should at least, right? At least some point you'll be curious and take out a book, hopefully. But even if not, just the very notion that there are books in the home creates a certain atmosphere in the home, that this is a Jewish home. I was very into that, creating an atmosphere in the home of Jewish homes. Even in children's bedrooms, I've encouraged that children should have in their bedrooms, that their room should be like a mini sanctuary. They should have their own siddur, their own tzedakah box, their own chumash in their rooms. That's theirs, so creating an environment of Jewishness in one's home. Pushka in one's home, attached to the wall. We talked about this, that in the kitchen wall, attached to the wall, there should be a mezuzah. And everyone once even said that it should be attached in such a way that it's forbidden to take it down on Shabbos. A tzedakah box, a charity box. It should be attached to the wall in such a way that it's forbidden to take it down on Shabbos. And in that way, it's halachically part of the physical structure of their house.
I was told you're not allowed to keep a siddur in the bedroom.
Adults, married couples. Children are a little different, hopefully. Right.
Is there unanimity on that this is a mitzvah?
To write a Torah? Yes, it seems.
Rambam,
that's correct.
Rambam and Ramban
Yeah,
both agree.
that's right.
The
This is one of the 613 mitzvahs, is to write a Torah, which is why there was like asking why hasn't been done yet, and presumably it wasn't done because it was just too expensive. They didn't have Torahs written all the time like we have, presumably. But now that it's available, we should all be doing it. Pay it's $1. Pay $1, and you have someone write a letter for you. Fulfill your obligation.
Is there like an online thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Google it. Unity Torah Israel or something, and you'll find a link in no time, and you pay $1 and you have a Torah letter written for you.
I've done it a few times.
Yeah.
Logically, how could originally? I mean, when this is originally a mitzvah,
Yeah.
2,225. How could this be a mitzvah for everyone? So writing a Sefer Torah 2,000 years ago or more was.
It's very difficult. So I imagine the way.
So how did, I mean,
Yeah.
I understand the one letter. If they all agree that one letter is good enough.
Everybody agrees one letter to get different out. This is straight to Gemara.
If that was the understanding 2,000 years ago, fine, I understand it.
Everybody agrees that one letter is good enough. So presumably, communities would get together, because every community has to have a Sefer Torah. That's another halacha, right? That communities have to get together and write a Torah. So community get together and write a Torah. Let's say it was sponsored by one person specifically. Fine, but each person can pay a little bit and have one letter for them, right? And I assume that that's the way it was, but over time it just kind of got lost because of how rare it is and because of the inconvenience of it, I suppose. And everyone was, on the one hand, trying to explain how they did it in the past, on the other hand, trying to reinstate this idea.
So how is the Torah written differently today than it was 1,000 years ago?
Why is it more common now?
No, how is it written differently?
It's not.
So you just said like 1,000 years ago it was difficult to write versus...
I think it's difficult because they weren't as wealthy. They didn't have the resources to pay someone to spend a year and a half writing a Torah. How did this guy live and eat for a year?
Okay.
And maybe, also we mentioned before, it could be like different things around the Torah were easier. Like making the parchment are easier today because we have machines and other things like that. But the writing itself is the same. But we're a wealthier society now. We can afford these things. Anyway,
More better communication. We can get
also better communication. I can communicate with someone in Israel to write a letter for me. Whereas if I live in the shtetl, I have to wait for a Torah to actually be written in my shtetl to pay a guy to write it for me. That's also true. Making it.
If you're in a shtetl, right, and you write a Sefer Torah, you're 350 people in the shtetl.
Yeah.
Everybody has a letter, and then they write it. What happens is that's their Torah for the next 100 years. So all the people were born after. How did they? That's the problem.
That's probably another reason why.
It's sort of like.
It's probably another reason why it dissipated.
Speaking, they couldn't do
Right.
that.
It's not like every generation they're writing a new one.
Right.
Not necessarily. Unless, like in theory, you could have, let's say, the Torah was found to be not kosher and they have to fix a letter. I'll pay for that letter to be fixed. Maybe.
Can you buy more than one letter and then resell them later?
To others? No, because they have to be commissioned to be written for you. Once it's written,
You can say commission for me and my heirs or da-da-da.
oh, if people haven't been born yet.
Yeah.
Davar shaloi bala olam. It's a good question. Halacha, I don't think so. Person has to commission Torah for it. So I want to conclude also, we're talking about having books in the home and pushkas and making an environment in the house. As I mentioned, there's having Jewish books in the home, create an environment. Pushka on the wall, they're encouraged that the physical structure of the house should have a mitzvah attached to it. That halachically speaking can't remove it, just like a mezuzah can't be removed, a pushka can't be removed. And likewise, they've added that there's halacha in Shabbos. There's a law in Jewish law that if I carry a cup and in the cup is a small crumb, right? On Shabbos, I'm allowed to carry from the public domain to a private domain and vice versa. So I'm carrying a cup with a small little crumb inside, and the reason why I'm carrying the cup is because I want the crumb. So the halacha is that I'm not, although it's forbidden, it's usher, but I'm not liable for carrying the cup because the cup is only serves the crumb that's inside, and the crumb that's inside is too small to be liable. although it's forbidden, I'm not liable. It's called Potter Aval Asa. So therefore, they kind of said, if the primary, why am I not liable for the cup? Because I'm only holding the cup for the crumb, even though the cup is much larger than the crumb. So likewise, even though my house is much larger than the few books that are in there, because the primary of my life is my Torah, which is the books I have in my house, so it's almost as if the entirety of the house is secondary to the few books that are in the home. So it's like the whole house is filled with Jewish books. So this is part of his campaign. Both of these elements, writing, bringing back this mitzvah of repopularizing the mitzvah of having a letter written, and likewise creating an environment in the home by having Jewish books in the home. Okay, a few more lines before we go, and then we'll continue, God willing, tomorrow. Okay, the Gemara now gets to the size of the parchments, right? The Torah is not one long parchment scroll. That would probably rip very easily, and I don't think our cow is big enough to make that. So you have it's a bunch of different parchments put together. Each parchment is called a yeriya, or a sheet. So there's a sheet apartment, and then each sheet apartment has a few pages or a few columns on it. And the Gemara is going to talk about the proper ratio of sheets, of columns to sheets, and sheets to Torah. That's the Gemara is going to get to right now. Tana Rabbanan, our sages taught, Oisa Adam Yeriya, a person can make a sheet that is one sheet of parchment. Mibas Shalish Dafnin should have at least space for 3 columns. Ba'ad Bas Shmoina Dafin, up to a sheet that has enough space for 8 columns. Pachis Mikan V'Yeser Alkein. More than that or less than that, Lo Yaseh shouldn't do. It's not as nice looking when the stitchings are too close to each other. Every second column is another stitching. It doesn't look as nice. So at least 3 columns. And likewise, having too much, they're too far apart. It's not as strong. When the stitchings are too far apart, the sheets aren't as strong. Likewise, V'Lo Yareh B'Dafin, he shouldn't try to, let's say he has a small sheet. We just finished saying you should have at least 3 columns. So he's going to be a smart aleck. He has a small sheet, so he's going to squeeze the columns to make them look much smaller. Don't do that. It's also ruining the look of it. Make them normally spaced or nicely spaced columns on a sheet. Nicely spaced columns, making 3 on a sheet. So don't try to make the columns too small.
Are the sheets all of equal length?
Not necessarily, but they should all have between 3 and 8 equally sized, properly sized columns, which we'll see in a moment what the proper size for a column is. So first it says, Lo Yareh B'Dafin, you shouldn't try to squeeze too many columns into one small sheet, right? Because it looks like a letter. Looks like a letter. You're just hand scribbling, trying to squeeze as much letters as you can, as much content as you can on one paper, right? So if you're paying for one paper to be, today it's easier, but like, imagine like airmail, we have this one paper that's rolled up into 3, making into an envelope. Like in the 70s, you had those, you know what I'm talking about? Those papers, aerograms, papers folded into 3, and that became your letter. So you only had one paper, right? So you try to squeeze as much as you can onto the page. So don't do that, because it'll make your Torah look like a letter. Trying to squeeze all these columns into a small sheet. And likewise, Lo Yamayet B'Dafin. Now, if you have a very, very long sheet of parchment, and we said you shouldn't have more than 8 columns, but this one's very long, so you're going to make these long, stretched out columns. Again, you're being a smart aleck in the reverse. So the Gemara, don't do that either. Why? Because not your word, because your eyes will wander. If the letters and words are too stretched out, it'll be hard to read. And by the time you get to the end of the page, you have to go back to find where the beginning of by the time you get to the end of the line, you have to find where the end of the beginning of the next line is. Your eyes will end up wandering. It's too hard to read. So, what's the proper size for a column? The amount of space it would take to write 3 large words. The word the Mishpach Hashem has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 letters. So 3 words of 10 letters each. That is, each column should have roughly the space of 30 letters. A little bit more because you have space between the words. Let's say 33 letters. So a 33 letter column, that's how big your column should be. So now we have the full picture of what the proper ratio column to sheets are. Between 3 and 8 columns per sheet, and each column should be roughly 33 letters wide.
Seems like a big difference, between 3 and 8. If you're saying 3 is nice.
3 is a minimum, 8 is
3 is a minimum, 8 is a max.
So they don't shrink those columns to fit 8 if they were to.
Okay, so let's look.
If you have a standard for a column, so how do you?
Right, so that's what we said before. Don't try to stretch out your columns or try to shrink your columns to make the numbers work. Keep your columns 33 letters wide. Now, how many can you put on a page? Make sure at least, how many can you put on a sheet? Make sure you have at least 3 and no more than 8. I was going to stop here, but since you asked...
I guess the spacing between the columns is variable.
Well, the space between the columns should be big enough that it looks like a column. Otherwise, it'll just look at one straight line. Right?
Some are very hard to read, like the small one we have.
The small ones take a very skilled writer. They're much more expensive because of that, especially if you get nice writing. Okay, so I was going to stop here, but since you mentioned about like making sheets look the same size as each other, let's finish. In his Damnalai, it so happened that he has now Yuriya, a sheet, Bas Tisha Dafen. So he has a sheet now that's big enough to put 9 properly spaced columns. It's too much. The threshold is 8. So now he wants to divide them. He has to split the sheets in half to make 2 different sheets. So the minimum is 3 and the maximum is 8. He has 9. So what does he think he can do? Lo yachlik, he shouldn't divide the sheets, making it shalish dakan, 3 on one, v'sheish dakan, and 6 on the other. Because now you're making unequal sheets. Although they're between the minimum and the maximum, but your first one is going to have 3 columns, and then the next sheet has 6 columns.
So you can just
It doesn't look so nice. Or rather, what should you do? Arba lakan 4 here, v'chamesh dakan and 5 here. So they're closer to each other. So it keeps uniformity, making it look nicer.
you need 100 sheets.
And therefore?
Therefore, like, just compare it to what sheets you're going to have after that.
Right, but right now you have 9. That's true, but right now you have one with 9. If you divided it into, I guess if all the rest of your sheets have 3, you can divide it into 3, 3, 3.
That's right.
3 times 3. But if you're going to divide it into 2, don't make one 3 and 6, although they're technically both in the same, within the spread, but it doesn't look as nice when you have different
When you read it, it has to be open so much
3 columns.
when you're reading it.
Yeah, 3 columns. We'll get to that as well. Not presently, but we'll get to that. Okay, concluding this halacha.
Also when you raise it.
Yeah. So the Gemara said, Medmar Mamorim, when is all of this said? This idea of not making your columns too long or too big. B'tchilas HaSefer, in the beginning of the book and throughout. Al b'sefer HaSefer, when you get to the very, very end of the Torah. So you're at the last couple of verses. And afilu pasuk echad, afilu daf echad. Even one verse and one column at the end on your last sheet. Pasuk echad sakadai techoni mean one verse. The Gemara is unclear what this means. So the Gemara clarifies. What we mean to say is pasuk echad b'daf echad. Is to say, if you have a sheet, or at least however you come to the conclusion, you shouldn't take your let's say you have 5 verses left. Don't take it and stretch it out over 3 columns because you have to have a minimum of 3 columns per sheet. Don't do that. When it comes to the very end, write normally, even if it ends up being 1 verse on 1 column. But throughout the rest of the Torah, organize it as such that you have properly sized columns and 3 minimum, 8 maximum. And try to cut your sheets in such a way that they're at least relatively the same size as each other.